So hello everyone and welcome back to the second part of this video, and now we want to have a look into Redshift, how to make everything look good and how to shade our volume here. So let's get started. I already switched my work layout to Redshift 101 and this is how the scene looks for now. So there's a lot to do. First of all, we are having the stair collider here, and I don't want to show this. I want to show the asset which we are using from the Megascan bridge. So that's part one. Then let's see. That's kind of weird. Obviously we offsetted the, I'll pause here for the IPR. I did make an offset with the collider, but I didn't select both of them. But I think that's not so good. That was not the best. I should have moved the null, not the object. So that was a bit stupid. Now I have to eyeball my stair here. Try to position it in the right way. That's not a good way. Definitely not the smartest move here. But perhaps if we copy the angle, perhaps it's fitting. And the axes are so the axis is on a pretty good angle position. So I could just type in the angle from the stair collider and we are pretty close there. So that was lucky. Let's hide the collider, switch back into our Redshift 1.1 view and save and render. Let's make the scene a bit bigger and quickly give you an idea about the lights. Or no, wait, let's first create some volumetric materials in Redshift. So we need to create Redshift material volume, and let's drag the volume onto fog1, activate our fog1, and now it should be invisible because we need to select the volume guy, and I will call this fog1 because only one material can be applied to one object. It's a bit of annoying, so you can copy the material to other things. You need to select the material and then drag fog1 into fog1. There's a channel and now it's visible. And I think we don't need this guy here. That's the node panel. I just found out that you can hide this because I'm always using Shift C here as well. So we have a bit more space here. And for now, let's reposition some of the stuff here so that we have a little bit more space to work with. Nice. So now we have these two values, the absorption and the scatter. And to be very honest, I'm just playing around with the values till I find something which I like. And I'm quickly duplicating the camera here and I'm deleting the keyframe so I can zoom into this guy, see what's happening, and there's a bokeh on it. Let's get rid of it. So now you can see that we have a lot of stepping in there. So therefore we need perhaps to increase our voxel size to 0.5 perhaps. And let's also make a render region, and the smoothing could be a bit more, perhaps 2 iterations of smoothing. And now it looks already way better, and perhaps even the voxel distance can be a bit bigger. So yeah, everything's very smooth now, and it's a bit of a hollow object right now, and that's because in this sweep we have the mesh point radius. In the other ones we are looking at the object itself, but in this case I really think this looks very interesting. You could play around with the mesh points. For example, if we reduce the radius, everything will be gone. If we increase the radius, it's gonna be more and more thick, and now there is nearly no inside part anymore, and I like the two pretty good. And we can also set the fall off. For example, let's make it 3. So there's not much of a difference. Perhaps that's already the maximum fall off. Yeah, we have the maximum fall off already. So this looks pretty nice. Let's have a look onto the materials. We can play around with some colors, and let's make this 2 opposite colors. And now, so the first value, the higher you go here, the more bright it will get. So if I make it a low value, it's getting more transparent and more gray. If I want it to be transparent and not so gray, I need to also drop down the amount of the coefficients, absorption coefficients. And now you can see it's really getting nearly invisible. And we could also make the opposite. Let's make it very dense, and this looks nearly like a scatter material now, and I think it looks nice. But now when the object is so dense, I can still see, you can see it's still the voxels, and it still doesn't look so nice. So perhaps we can even drop down the voxel size a bit to 0.4 or even 0.3. That's better not. We could switch back again to the signed field, and I quickly only want to see how dense the mesh is. So I'm pressing NB on the keyboard, and we are already very dense. So yeah, I wouldn't go below 0.4. And switching back to fog, then we need to work a bit with the smoothing. So perhaps again more iterations, and perhaps you can also apply a second smoothing. Let's get rid of this one for now, and let's go with median. Also more iterations, and a bigger voxel distance, more iterations. And let's see if we can get rid of the stepping a bit. It's starting to look better, and perhaps in combination with the bigger smoothing, the Gaussian smoothing, we get a better edge. And yeah, it really depends on the look, what you like. This looks quite interesting, I would say. And also I like the density of the object. We could try to lower it a little bit, let's say 7, so it's a bit more opaque. And I also already like the colors. So let's switch back into our main camera and see how it looks. Yep, looks nice. Then let's duplicate the material and call it fog2. And in fog2, let's activate the guy, apply the material, and it's gone, because in fog2 we need to throw in the fog object, and now it should be visible. Let's switch the cameras again. And in this one, we have another type. Remember, we just dragged in the material. We don't have the mesh points, and it's a whole mesh thingy now. Let's optimize the holes just to be sure we have everything in there. Let's drop down the voxel size to 0.5, and let's change the colors. I don't know, perhaps something less saturated and definitely more opaque. Perhaps this one should be, or some reddish. Let's drop down. And now you can see, for example, if I'm dropping down this way too much, this looks really very glowy. And there's a interesting value. When you go too little, it looks weird. It just looks too bright. But I would say if we dropped it a little bit down, like 0.7 to 1, it looks pretty nice. And perhaps we can even desaturate the scatter coefficients. See? Yeah, I like it. So let's save this guy, and for the smoothing, again, I will make it a little bit more, so we will try to get rid of this edge here. Also try to get rid of the edge a bit more if we increase the voxel fall off. See, the edge is getting smoothed now. It's more transparent. It's getting more and more transparent, but I don't want it too much here. Then let's activate the last one, and we can also go in a frame a bit later, so we see a bit more. Duplicate the material, apply to material 3, rename it so we don't get lost in it, replace the channel here, and this one should be darker, I would say, and let's make it a green one. Let's go with 8 here, and I don't know, 2 here, but it's too saturated, I would say, and perhaps with a bit more orange, but still too saturated. We're getting close, something like that. But again, we see a lot of weird voxels here. So drop down the voxel size, 0.5 was the radius we had. Let's add another smoothing. This time I'll take mean and increase the iterations and the voxel distance. And this looks pretty good, but perhaps there's some stepping in there. Yeah, this looks nice. Save this guy. And by the way, when the scene starts to get looking better, I quickly want to position some objects which are really in the way here. But why do you see this weird bug? The image on the right is like moving from left to right. It's a little bit flickering here. Weird. For now, that's all right. We'll do this later. Now these guys, so duplicate this guy, and I will call them fog fall, and this is the one we need to apply a volume builder. The volume builder is a fog, and we had a voxel distance of, let's try 0.7 because the object's a bit bigger. Well, actually, fog fall. Let's duplicate this guy and let's apply them in here. So both want to add a smoothing, and fog fall comes in here. Select the material, drag and drop. Second fog fall, leg, apply, drag and drop, and save. And let's start with this one. So first of all, I think it could be interesting if the overall volume is a bit bigger. So I want to increase the mesh point radius. So now this is a bigger blob, and in this case it could be also nice if it's more transparent. Let's try a value of 1 for these ones, and let's see, perhaps some orangey color could work. Well, and see, I'm applying the material to the wrong guy, but that's good. Wait, which one is this one now? Yeah, it's the bottom one, but I applied it to the top material, and this is too bright, I would say. So let's increase the absorption. Now it should get darker, and also this object. So because we're working on this texture from the top one, let's select the top one, and it could be also nice to increase the radius for the mesh. And let's see how it changes. And then we need to change the voxel fall off so it's more smooth to the edges. And yeah, something like that looks pretty nice, I would say. And for the smoothing, I again increased the voxel size and increased iteration so it's a bit more smooth. Nice. So let's have a look onto another frame. Yeah, this looks nice. Now there comes one additional thing which is interesting, which I talked in the very beginning of the first tutorial, where there is a noise cutting pieces out of there. And this works by adding a fog multiply. And if we multiply it by 0, everything should be gone. It's gone. And I don't want that. I want to multiply it by a very small number. And if we add a noise to the multiplier now, let's go for shader field, and in the shader field, let's select a noise. And to be able to see this better, first of all, let's hide the material to a bit more room. We can increase the contrast, and let's switch also the camera to the object itself. And now you can very good see what the noise is doing. It's cutting out pieces here. So if I change the seed, this volume object looks way different. And that's what we want. So therefore, I'll also switch it to wavy turbulence. And I think the scale is already pretty good, but I don't want this harsh contrast. It's just for helping you to see what we are doing here. I want a bit of a variation. So 65% is good. But one thing again, let's increase it back to 100%. And remember the thing when I said the noise is static? We need to try to avoid that. And it's kind of impossible to see in the scene here. But we need an animation speed so that the voice is moving, and perhaps the space. Let's try object. I'm not sure if this will help, if it will move with the object, or if we need to render on world. But we are hiding the fact that the noise is static with the animation. And 2 is quite fast. There was the thing here, exactly. You can click on animate, you can see how quick this is moving. This is very fast, and let's make it one. But I remember in the other one I also had the value something like that. Yeah, let's go with object and animation speed of 1. Let's hope that we don't see the noise being static there. Let's try to go a bit step by step. And we have these 3 holes here. Yeah, I hope they would move. So yeah, but then dropping down the contrast to something like this, so it's also not that obvious. And overall, this piece of volume really looks super interesting. And we need to do the same with the green one, or let's say the green one shouldn't be so opaque. We only want to make it a bit more smooth. And one is Gaussian and one is median, and you want more iterations. And the voxel size should be also smaller. Let's see. And more smoothing. Yeah, in between is the value 3. And perhaps the mesh point radius be 2 or 1.5. 2 was better. With 1.5 we are already very opaque here again. And that's, I think these are values which I like here. Now we just need to fine tune the composition, the objects, a little bit of the light, and a little bit of rendering. So let's focus on placing some of the objects, and perhaps in this case again the golden spiral could help us a little bit. This object could be, perhaps it's already pretty close, perhaps let's move it a little bit up and a bit to the right. So my disc player here, and by the way I painted a lot of these textures with the iPad. That's pretty easy, and I think I also posted the video how to do that on Patreon. It's also on YouTube, so you can check that out if you want to. And yeah, I'm trying to find a spot, and I think it could be again also like 10% bigger composition wise, and Press a little bit more to the right, and there's some intersection on the floor. This could be good. And perhaps if we look at the object, we make it a little bit less reflective because it's pretty bright here. And let's have a look at the IOR. Let's drop that down to 1.3. And let's position the other stuff around here. What do we have? One Euro box, Euro box, is it? It's a bit hovering and also too small. Again, scaling up for 10%. Repositioning a little bit. Yeah, something like that works for me. Then the Xbox, for my taste, is a little bit too close to the center, so let's move it a bit more to the left to increase the tension of the frame. And I scaled it up a bit, but I think it's too big. Let's just scale it up like 5%, and let's rotate it a little bit, and let's see if we can position it correctly. And it's still hovering. Drag it down and a little bit of rotating. So that's good. Then the boxes, well, it's an instance of the other Euro box. So let's position this somewhere else in the frame, and perhaps also a little bit of rotation. So something like that. And it's a bit tedious to place all the objects. You could try to use the place object, but I don't know, it's so buggy for me in more complex scenes. So I just directly go and place the objects by hand. And perhaps something, I don't know, let's have a look at some other frames to think about what we should do with these two guys. Perhaps they are already in a good position because I like the overlapping with the box here, so it creates a bit of depth in the frame. And let's just position them a little bit, yeah, like that. And now we need a position for this. It's a Wi-Fi speaker, and perhaps it can go in the upper corner. Let's check a few more frames where a good position could be. Or we will also place it here on the front. Let's see, perhaps this one here could be nice. Let's rotate it. So it's looking good. Then I would say we have to judge the overall color composition. And I think this yellow thing is too yellow. It takes a bit too much attention here. So I can just use my color correction node here and perhaps try the opposite color and make it a bit more desaturated and even more desaturated and a bit darker perhaps. Yeah, that's better. And now the last thing, I think it would be interesting to not have 2 times the same green tone. And I like this big blob here. So perhaps then we should try to work onto this spline here. And let's see if we will try, what should we try? We actually have a lot of colors here. So let's see if we want to go with a pretty much desaturated look and not as opaque, 1 and 0.5, and perhaps a little bit more desaturated, 0.25. Yeah, that's good. Now we have definitely a concentration from colors and the light more into the center. It's a bit more less important. So that's good. And yeah, I think it looks pretty nice. Then we could think about fine-tuning the light and the camera. So let's have a look at the first frame from our camera here. So I think it would be nice to have a background as well, because it looks a little bit like an error if we just have a black frame up here. That could be a bit weird, and I remember we were hiding the stage and the background is still somewhere else. So let's put that into place. And for the background, I think it was nice that it was a little bit darker. And I have a gradient here from the shot before. And yeah, I'm just toning it a little bit more gray. So we have a good contrast here. That's nice. Then let's turn on the light and let's hide the materials again. And let's see what we got. So we got the rim light, which isn't a rim anymore. It's a side light. And I think it's a super interesting spotlight. But perhaps the spotlight could be targeting not one position. Perhaps the spotlight should target this guy. So the remesh, that's the orange one, should be our target here. So instead of the center target tag, which we are having into my light setup, I'm replacing that with the remesh light, and now the spotlight should always follow the position from the remesher, and the light should move a little bit, which can be interesting in the scene. But I don't know. It's not really pointing. It's following the object, but the light is kind of looking somewhere else. So that's not working. Let's go back to the center, and now I can just reposition the null for the center to find a spot where I want to have the spotlight. And I'm checking out roughly the last frames. Yeah, I think that's good. So then the rim light, which can be a bit higher because our angle of the stairs changed a little bit. So we need to go a bit up, so some of the light will hit the stairs here. And to show you what is happening there, let's really solo only that light. Let's make it a bit more sharp and a bit more stronger. And now we have some nice contrasts here on all the edges. Then my top left light, it can be actually a bit more from the top. So it's more evenly distributing the light, and perhaps it can be a bit weaker. Let's try the value from 5. And still the scene looks very dark. Perhaps we can crank up the GI bounces and this GI strength from the top light. Let's also put on the dome light, which gives us an overall light illumination, and our little spot light. I think the spot is too strong in this case. Let's go with 4, and overall we have too much light in the scene now. So I will reduce the intensity from the HDI, and perhaps even the top light could go down to 4. And I think it's pretty good. Let's check out another frame, how it will look. Still have the feeling that we have a little bit too much light in the scene. So let's reduce the intensity by the dome light. And I think this is a bit better. And again, when I look into the frames more at the end, perhaps this guy is too bright. You always have to ask yourself, is this image balanced? And where do the eyes go? And this is very bright. The eye always goes into bright areas, and this takes too much focus for my taste. So let's make it a little bit less saturated, and that's my fog object number 2. And we need to make it darker, so let's increase the absorption coefficiency. Perhaps a little bit desaturated, and let's make it 1.1 or 1.3. Yeah, I think it fits better now in the image. The contrast is not that high. And let's just check out the color from this container box. I have the feeling it's too bright. It's taking too much attention from the side, and also perhaps it's better to go tone and tone. If we have a green corner here, could be nice to have a gray-green box. Yeah, definitely better. It's not taking so much attention to this corner, which is not that important. Then if I look at the thing, perhaps also our volume object here could get a little bit more attention. That means it can be a little bit more vivid, more bright, and a little bit too saturated, perhaps. Let's see. That's too little. Yeah, that's nice. That's nice. And let's save. The good thing is on the scene that we have some objects which are sharp, which are our props here and the stairs, because these objects are so soft. If the whole scene would be soft, it would be also difficult for the eye to follow something. But I am pretty happy. Perhaps fine-tuning and fine-tuning. So that's all it takes. Perhaps this guy should be a bit thicker. I have the feeling it's too thin compared to the other ones. So we need to select this one and use the mesh point radius. Obviously not 15, as you can see it's getting huge, which also looks interesting, but let's try out, I don't know, 3, and the voxel fall off of 2, 3 and 2.5 perhaps, or 2. Yeah, which is also nice. Now we get the holes again in there. But perhaps I wanted a bit less than on this one. So let's try the value from 2.2. Slightly, we have this feeling from here. That's good. And overall, I'm pretty happy with the result. Just perhaps we are just still a little bit too saturated on the green down here. Tiny little bit. So let's change the values here, and that's that. Nice. We have now the objects, the lights, the camera. Let's have a look onto the bokeh. So let's pick a focus point here. We can go for none, pick the point, and in the camera there's anyway no focus object in there, but anyway I only want very little bokeh, so let's reduce it even to 0.4 so that we get slightly unsharp back and front. But I like the graphical approach, so everything's pretty flat and sharp. Then if I look at this frame now, perhaps also we are a little bit too much zoomed in. It feels tiny bit too narrow. So yeah, I zoomed out a little bit and it feels a bit better now. So basically, I love the frame. It looks all nice. We tweaked and added and made a lot of things. And what I would do now is just set up everything for rendering. And I have a preset. You can save a preset and load a preset here. And I have my Fun Motion EXR preset. And I render it in 1536 to 1920. And from frame 15 to 200. I will go for now with basic and medium quality. I want deformation blur, and I will just have one more steps. And I want the ray tracing available and 16-bit. We want to have 32-bit OpenEXR with one line. Here the zip compression in blocks of 16 scan lines. Yeah, but overall I talked about render settings before, so this is just a quick overview. If you watch this video as your first video, then you will have a glimpse of that. So I think we are done. Then let's save and let's render one frame as a real preview. So I don't want to render in bucket, then I don't see the motion blur. I want to render this thing here, and on my PC here, this might take a while. So the frame is finished and it took really long, like 6 minutes and 17 seconds, even though a very long time I had to wait till the frame was actually loaded into Redshift and it started to render. I might have the clue that the deformation blur takes a while. Deformation blur is really buggy. When you have weird things happening, turn off your deformation blur. And perhaps in our scene here, it's not so much benefiting us. I would say I'll try to leave it off in the final rendering to be able to have a faster render and perhaps not this long loading time. But also when I have a look onto these things, they are still a little bit voxelic. So we need a bit more smoothing and perhaps a little bit higher voxel number, which again makes everything slower. But especially this guy is still too, it's too, I don't know, doesn't look too good yet. And also when I have a look onto this whole frame, this white box still annoys my eye a lot. We have way too much contrast here. We have a black and white contrast, which always drives the eye there, and it's a very bright spot. So this we have to work on. So let's continue on there. So I will hide the lights and select the material for this box here. And let's have a look what I did there with the diffuse color, and it's a combination of some stuff. I don't know what I did there, but we can probably easy fix that. In the end, just put in a ramp with some other colors. But let's see what we got there. What did I do there? Let's perhaps just directly put the color correction in there, reduce the contrast and make it a bit darker. And let's see how this looks. And also we can increase the roughness. And this is an old material. It's not the new yet, but I'm too lazy to change it for here because it's such a non-hero object, so it doesn't matter. So it's a bit too dark now. It's starting to decrease the contrast as well, but making it a little bit brighter and just a little bit, I would say this is better. Then again, going to my zooming camera here, and definitely from time to time press save, and let's close the camera, the objects and the fox both do have different voxel sizes. So let's try 0.4 for both of them. And this guy, definitely more smoothing. 4. And voxel distance, make it 6. Yeah, I would say this is way better now, way better. And perhaps we can even make the inner voxel fall off to 2, so we get a bit more a smooth edge here. And I think I even need a render region, because it's quite intense to render, but now I can better see. We still got a little bit of this voxel thingy here, but definitely way better than before. But I don't know, let's increase both, and let's see. A voxel distance of 7 and 7 iterations is actually quite much. And you can see now it updated, and now it's definitely gone. Let's take a quick screenshot to the picture view, like a tiny thing here. And let's deactivate, for example, the Gaussian blur, so you can see a difference there. Whoa, I mean, I don't even have to put that into the picture view to show you the difference between the two of them. That's like day and night. So, but how does it look if we move off the other blurring, the median, put that into picture view, and there's not really a difference, I would say, so we can get rid of it, save some computation power. Well, but it got really smooth now. I like we should get it a bit more dense again, so let's reduce the voxel fall off and perhaps a little bit less. It's very soft here. Voxel distance going back to 4. Yeah, something like that. Looks good. And the other one anyway looked pretty good. And let's try to also increase these guys. How much do they have? 0.4, 0.5. Let's try 0.35 and let's save. And again, as I said, let's turn off the deformation blur and hope that it will render a bit faster. So then, overall, we are done with the scene. Are we? Just one little last detail. Now you see the two colors of these boxes are nearly the same. And it would be nice to have a bit of a variation. So I will go with a warmer color on the top left. Yeah, perfect. So let's save it and put it onto the render queue and hope it will render overnight. So thank you very much for listening and watching, and I hope to see you next month. Have a good month and bye bye.